All right, so now we are going to be graphing absolute value. So before we get into any changes that could happen, we're going to look at how to graph this. So there's just a plain old X. Now I'm going to go to mode. Nope, wrong one. Sorry. Go to math. And we're going to go over to number. And then ABS stands for absolute value. Now I did get out of it. So we're going to go to math, number, and then number 1 is your absolute value. Okay, and you can see the lines now. I'm going to just put the X inside of that. Now make sure you arrow over to push enter so you can see the true absolute value. So there's our just X, but this one is our absolute value, okay? We remember that whenever you have the absolute value, can you be negative? And we've talked about that being the coat of righteousness, and you're never negative, okay? You're always positive. So that's why it reflects that line back up. Let's go back here. I'm going to get rid of my X so we can just see the plain old absolute value, which is there, okay? It is always exactly the same. Now, let's look at graphing. I'm going to put, again, the absolute value. So I'm going to go to math, and then number, and then 1. And this time, I'm going to put X inside, but I'm going to subtract 3. Okay, let's see what this does to our graph. Look at that. Okay, now on this, we can see here was our original absolute value, but this one went down 1, 2, 3. We now have a new vertex, okay? So let's pull over here. We started with, we looked at the absolute value of X, okay? And we found it looked something like that, okay? Then what we did is we did the absolute value of X. We left that alone, but we subtracted 3, okay? Now, when we look at this one, our vertex is at 0, 0. But when we look at this new graph, it moved it down 3. So 1, 2, 3, it went right there. It still had exactly the same pattern. Okay, but now my vertex is at 0 in the X direction and 1, 2, 3 in the Y direction. So this takes my absolute value function and moves it down 3 units. Okay, but you can actually graph this. You could make a table. There's a bunch of things you could do. Okay, now let's try moving it a little bit differently. Okay, so let's go back to our Y equals. And this time, let me get it so we can see again. Let's do, there we go. We'll do the absolute value, so math, and then we're going to go over to number and enter for 1. Okay, this time I am going to do the absolute value of X, but I'm going to put the -3 inside. Actually, let's change it to a 5 so we can tell the difference. Okay, so I'm going to put X minus 5 inside. Okay, now let's see. This was our original. There's the absolute value of X. This was when we moved it down 3. But look at that. It moved it over 5. So let's take a look at what we just did, okay? Our new function was the absolute value of X minus 5, okay? And what it did is it moved it over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, approximately there. It kept the same design. Mine's a little bit off, but anyway. But now I have a new vertex of 5 in the X direction and 0 in the Y direction. Okay, so this one moved me positive direction 5 units. Okay. So again, as long as you know your basic absolute value, this is going to move you down. So if it was a positive 3, it would move you up. This one is going to move you to the left or to the right. Okay. The minus 5 moves us to the right. It's a little bit different than what you would think there. All right, now I'm going to clear those off. We're going to go back to the calculator again. I'm going to keep my absolute value of x. All right, so I'm going to keep that one. But this time, I'm going to put in, let's do 2 times the absolute value of x. Okay, so let's look at this one. There's the first one. Look at that one. So it kept the same vertex, but it made it much wider. It doubled it, right? It grew it. Okay, so in this one, we put the equation 2 times the absolute value of x, okay? It kept the vertex, but we know, what if we plugged in 1 there? Okay, 1 for my x tells me 2 times 1. So it would be out here, and it's not looking as fat as the other one, but anyway. So it's kind of like this. So again, we could plug in numbers. Okay, we could put in x and y. We could put in x of 1, gave you 2 for y, right? You could put x in of negative 1. The absolute value of negative 1 is 1 times 2 would also be 2, okay, which is why it goes both ways. But that one made it wider, okay? So the 2 here made it wider. Okay, which means if we were to do, let's say, let's try a different number, 1/5 of x. If this one made it wider, what do you think this would do? Okay, let's see. So we're going to come down here. All right, I'm going to put 1/5. I'm going to put it in parentheses so that the 1/5 stays together. Now math, number, absolute value, and I'm just going to type in an x there. And I'm going to hit enter, and let's see. That really made it wider, didn't it? Okay, so it was like all the way down here. Okay. All right, so let's go back here for a minute. Let's clear out our x graph. Oops, hold on. I'm going to clear out my x graph. There we go. So there was my 2. So it actually looks like it's skinnier, right? Because it actually was taking it up a bit, right? I just drew my black one wrong. Okay. This one then, so this one was actually skinnier, right? When we look at it, this made this one skinny, where this one, see how fat that thing is? So this made this one fat. Okay. But again, you can plug these into your calculator. You can do a table to figure out your values and graph. Okay. It will help if you can remember that if you leave your absolute value alone, this just tells you to move up or down, however many units. When you put it inside of the absolute value, it moves you horizontally, either way, left or right. And then when you put the numbers outside, it just makes it skinny or fat. Now, one other one that we need to take a look at, the absolute value of, or the negative absolute value. That's the opposite of the absolute value. So instead of being our positive absolute value, right, we are now negative, so it actually flips it underneath. Okay. So that'll help you when you're doing your problems to make sure that you've got it in the right position.